My name is Stephanie, and at 32 years old, I inherited a technology company worth $25.6 million from my grandfather. When Michael proposed, I decided to keep my wealth quiet until after the wedding. Everything seemed perfect on our wedding day, but I caught a glimpse of something cold in his mother Eleanor's eyes as we exchanged vows. Something about the calculating way she watched me made my stomach twist with unease. If only I had trusted that feeling sooner. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about trusting your instincts when others try to take what is yours. My grandfather Harold was more than just family to me. He was my mentor, my hero, and ultimately my legacy. Growing up, I spent countless weekends at his house, sitting on a stool in his garage as he tinkered with circuit boards and explained how technology would change the world. Harold had built his company from nothing but an idea, and that very garage. By the time I was in high school, Williams Tech Solutions had offices in 3 states and was valued at over $10 million. Business is about vision and trust. Steph, he would tell me while soldering components. See what others cannot, and know who deserves your faith. He would quiz me on market trends while we worked, teaching me to think critically about innovation and competition. When I graduated from college with my business degree, he insisted I start at the bottom of his company, working my way through every department. No shortcuts, he would say. You need to understand every moving part to run the machine. I was 29 when Harold died unexpectedly from a heart attack. The loss crushed me in ways I still struggle to describe. He was only 72, still working 60-hour weeks, and excited about new projects. The funeral was a blur of faces and condolences that felt hollow compared to the emptiness his absence created. 2 weeks later, I sat in his attorney office with my parents and uncle as the will was read. While everyone received meaningful bequests, the room fell silent when the attorney announced that Harold had left me 80% ownership of Williams Tech Solutions, along with his voting rights and the position of Chief Executive Officer. She is too young, my uncle protested immediately. Harold made his wishes very clear, the attorney replied, sliding a sealed envelope across the desk to me. He also left this for you, Stephanie. That night alone in my apartment, I read my grandfather's letter through tears. He had been preparing me for this responsibility my entire life, he wrote. He believed in me more than anyone else, and knew I would protect and grow what he had built. The first year running the company was the hardest of my life. I leaned heavily on George, my grandfather, longtime advisor, and Patricia, his loyal executive secretary, who knew where every file was kept and how Harold handled every situation. Together we navigated the transition, and to everyone's surprise, especially my uncle, the company not only survived but thrived under my leadership. By the time I met Michael at a charity gala supporting STEM education for girls, Williams Tech Solutions was worth $25.6 million and expanding into international markets. Michael was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in my passion for technology entrepreneurship. He worked as a financial consultant for a prestigious firm, and our conversations about business strategies and market trends were exhilarating. Our relationship moved quickly. Michael took me to elegant restaurants, weekend getaways to vineyards, and surprised me with thoughtful gifts that showed he was paying attention to my interests. After 4 months of dating, he invited me to meet his family at their suburban home for Sunday dinner. His mother Eleanor was impeccably dressed in a cashmere sweater and pearls when she opened the door. Her smile was perfect, but never quite reached her eyes as she welcomed me into their immaculate home. His father Thomas was quieter, offering a firm handshake before returning to his newspaper in the living room. Throughout dinner, Eleanor peppered me with questions about my family, my career, and my future plans. Each query felt like a gentle probe, seeking vulnerable points. "And what exactly does your company do, dear?" she asked, cutting her roast beef into precise pieces. "We develop software solutions for healthcare systems," I answered deliberately, keeping my explanation simple. "How interesting. And is it successful? Michael mentioned you took over from your grandfather?" "We do well enough," I replied cautiously. Eleanor leaned forward. Family businesses can be such fragile things during transitions. I hope you have good financial advisors. Her eyes flickered to Michael. My son has quite the head for investments. Perhaps he could look things over for you. That was the first warning sign I should have heeded. Throughout the evening, Eleanor returned to money topics, repeatedly asking about my apartment, whether I planned to buy a house, and if my parents had set up trusts for their retirement. On the drive home, Michael apologized for his mother's inquisitiveness. She just wants to make sure I am with someone stable, he explained. Her own family lost everything when she was young. I found myself unwilling to share the full extent of my company's success with Michael that night. Something in Eleanor's persistent questions had triggered my caution. I told myself I was waiting to be certain of our relationship before complicating it with significant wealth. My grandfather had always warned that money changes how people see you, and I wanted Michael to love me for who I was, not what I owned. In retrospect, my decision to keep Williams Tech Solutions' value a secret was the wisest choice I ever made, though not for the reasons I originally thought. 14 months into our relationship, Michael proposed at my favorite restaurant, the small Italian place where we had our first date. He got down on one knee beside our table, presenting a princess-cut diamond ring that caught the candlelight beautifully. "Stephanie Campbell, you are the most amazing woman I have ever known," he said, his voice steady and sure. "Will you marry me?" The joy I felt in that moment was pure and overwhelming. I said yes without hesitation, and the restaurant erupted in applause as Michael slipped the ring onto my finger. We celebrated with champagne, making plans and dreaming about our future together. The excitement of engagement carried us through the first few weeks of wedding planning. I envisioned a small, elegant ceremony with our closest friends and family at a local botanical garden. Michael seemed equally enthusiastic about my ideas, nodding along as I showed him venue photos and potential color schemes. Everything changed when Eleanor became involved. What began as occasional suggestions quickly morphed into complete takeover of every decision. "The botanical garden is much too casual for my son's wedding," she declared during our first planning lunch. "I have already spoken with the events coordinator at the Riverside Grand Hotel. They have an opening next spring that would be perfect." The Riverside was the most expensive venue in the city, known for extravagant ballroom weddings that cost more than most people's down payment on a house. When I expressed concern about the price, Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. "William and I will contribute, of course. This is our only son wedding." I looked to Michael for support, but he merely shrugged. "Mom has always dreamed of seeing me married at the Riverside," he said. "And it is beautiful." That pattern repeated with every aspect of wedding planning. The guest list expanded from our original 75 to over 200 people, most of whom were Eleanor business associates and social connections I had never met. The menu changed from our favorite local caterer to the hotel formal dining service. Even my choice of wedding dress was scrutinized, with Eleanor insisting on accompanying me to fittings and pushing for more elaborate gowns than I had wanted. Throughout this process, Michael rarely took my side. "It means so much to her," he would say whenever I expressed frustration, "and she is paying for most of it." I began to wonder if I was marrying a man or his mother puppet. 6 months before the wedding, I met Michael, older brother William, and his wife Audrey for dinner. William had the same charming smile as Michael, but seemed more assertive and independent. Audrey was stylish and friendly, though I noticed tension between her and Eleanor during family gatherings. After dinner, while the brothers discussed sports, Audrey pulled me aside on the pretext of showing me photos of their recent vacation. "I need to tell you something," she whispered once we were alone. "Eleanor destroyed my wedding too, but that was just the beginning. She has tried to control our finances, our home decisions, even when we would have children. William finally stood up to her last year, and now she barely speaks to us." "Michael seems to think her involvement is normal," I said, feeling a chill at Audrey's words. "It is not normal, Stephanie. And it does not stop after the wedding. If anything, it gets worse." She squeezed my arm. "Just be careful. Eleanor sees her sons as extensions of herself, not as independent men, with partners who matter. The warning lodged in my mind impossible to ignore as wedding preparations continued. I began noticing how Eleanor would casually bring up financial topics whenever we were together. "Michael tells me you own your company outright," she mentioned during a cake tasting. "That must be such a responsibility for someone so young. Have you considered bringing in more experienced management?" Another time, she asked, "Do you plan to merge finances completely after the wedding? William and Audrey keep things separate, which I find so strange for a married couple." 3 months before the wedding, I consulted Natalie, an attorney friend who specialized in family law. We met for coffee at a small cafe far from my office or home where I was unlikely to run into anyone who knew Michael or his family. "I am concerned about protecting my company after marriage," I explained, keeping my voice low. "It was inherited before our relationship, but I worry about complications." Natalie's expression grew serious. "Have you discussed a prenuptial agreement with Michael?" "No," I admitted. "I worry it would seem like I do not trust him." "Trust is important," she said carefully, "but so is protecting your inheritance and your grandfather's legacy. If you are uncomfortable with a prenup, there are other options. You could place the majority of your shares in an irrevocable trust before the marriage, which would help keep them as separate property." The idea made sense. I could maintain control of the company while legally distinguishing it from marital assets. After our meeting, I contacted Megan, my company chief financial officer, and explained the situation without revealing my concerns about Eleanor. "It is just good business planning," I told her, "separating personal and corporate risk." Megan helped arrange the necessary paperwork, and within weeks, 75% of my shares were secured in a trust with me as the sole trustee. The remaining 25% stayed in my name, still representing significant value, but a smaller risk if things went wrong. As our wedding day approached, I noticed growing tension in my relationship with Michael. He seemed distracted during our evenings together, constantly checking his phone and having whispered conversations with his mother. When I asked what they were discussing so intently, he claimed they were finalizing wedding surprises for me. I wanted to believe him, but Audrey's warning echoed in my thoughts. The woman who had planned every detail of our wedding down to the napkin folds was unlikely to be secretly arranging delightful surprises for my benefit. 1 week before the wedding, I almost called it off. Michael and I had our first major fight when I suggested reducing Eleanor's role in our post-wedding lives. "She is my mother," he snapped, his face flushing with anger. "She only wants what is best for us." "For you, maybe," I countered. "She barely knows me, Michael. She has never made an effort to understand what I want." He softened, then taking my hands and looking into my eyes with what seemed like genuine remorse. "After the wedding, things will be different," he promised. "We will be our own family. You will see." I chose to believe him because I wanted our future together. The alternating doubt and hope left me exhausted, but I pushed forward, telling myself that marriage would change our dynamic with Eleanor for the better. I had no idea how prophetic that thought would be, though not in the way I had hoped. Heather, my best friend since college, organized my bachelorette party at a lakeside cabin 2 weeks before the wedding. She had gathered my closest friends for a weekend of wine games and relaxation, away from wedding stress. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again, laughing until my sides hurt as we reminisced about our college adventures and shared relationship stories. To Stephanie, Heather toasted on our first night, raising her glass. "The smartest, most compassionate boss lady I know. Michael is lucky to have you, and he better remember that." The peaceful weekend was interrupted Saturday afternoon, when Eleanor's unexpected voice called from the front porch. Heather opened the door with poorly concealed annoyance to find my future mother-in-law holding a large gift basket. "I thought I would drop by with some wedding day essentials," Eleanor announced, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Her eyes scanned the cabin, taking in the wine bottles and snack platters with barely disguised disapproval. "That is, thoughtful." I managed, accepting the basket filled with expensive skincare products and a wedding planning binder I had already seen. Eleanor stayed for nearly an hour, dominating conversation with wedding details and advice about marriage that no one had asked for. The light-hearted mood of our weekend deflated under her presence. After she finally left, Heather poured herself another large glass of wine. "That woman is terrifying," she declared. "She drove 2 hours to crash your bachelorette party just to mark her territory." "She is intense," I acknowledged, feeling the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. Heather fixed me with a serious look. "Steph, are you sure about this? Not about Michael necessarily, but about having that woman as your mother-in-law for the rest of your life?" I had been asking myself the same question, with increasing frequency. The night before the wedding, I stayed at the Riverside Grand Hotel where the ceremony would take place. My parents had the suite next door, and we had enjoyed a quiet family dinner before separating to rest before the big day. Unable to sleep, I stepped onto the balcony of my suite around midnight, hoping the night air would calm my nerves. That is when I heard Michael's voice from the balcony below mine, where he was staying with his groomsmen. "Yes, Mom, everything is arranged," he was saying, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet night. "We will do it just like you planned." Eleanor's response was too quiet for me to hear clearly, but Michael's next words froze the blood in my veins. "I will make sure to get her signature right after the wedding. She trusts me completely." A pause then. Of course I know what is at stake. This could set us up for life. What document could be so important that it needed my signature immediately after our wedding, and why did it involve Eleanor? I retreated into my room, mind racing with possibilities, none of them comforting. Despite my unease, the wedding day arrived with picture-perfect weather and the flawless coordination that comes with an unlimited budget. The Riverside Grand Ballroom had been transformed into an elegant garden scene with thousands of white roses and crystal chandeliers draped with greenery. My wedding dress was admittedly beautiful, a fitted lace gown with delicate beading that Eleanor had selected from an exclusive boutique. My father teared up when he saw me in the bridal suite, and for a moment the joy of the occasion overshadowed my concerns. "You look like a princess, sweetheart," he said, voice catching. "Harold would have been so proud to see you today." The mention of my grandfather brought both comfort and a pang of doubt. Would he have approved of Michael? Of this elaborate wedding that felt more like Eleanor production than my own? I pushed those thoughts aside as the music began signaling it was time to walk down the aisle. Michael waited at the altar, handsome in his tailored tuxedo, smiling broadly as I approached. Next to him stood William, as best man, and beside the officiant stood Eleanor, wearing a champagne-colored gown that nearly matched my white dress in its ornateness. As I reached the altar and handed my bouquet of white peonies to Heather, I glanced at Eleanor. The coldness in her eyes contradicted her smiling face so starkly that I nearly took a step back. She looked at me not as a beloved new daughter but as an acquisition to be managed. The ceremony proceeded beautifully with heartfelt vows and the traditional exchange of rings. Michael's voice was steady as he promised to love and cherish me forever, but I could not help wondering if those words meant the same thing to both of us. Our reception was as grand as Eleanor had planned, with 5 courses of gourmet food, a 10-piece orchestra, and champagne flowing freely for the 230 guests. I recognized perhaps 50 faces in the crowd. The rest were Eleanor Connections business associates of Thomas, or friends of friends who had made the ever-expanding guest list. During dinner, Eleanor gave an unscheduled speech that made my skin crawl in retrospect. "I have waited years to see my Michael find the right partner," she began, standing elegantly with her champagne flute. "Someone who understands the importance of family and the responsibilities that come with joining ours." Her eyes fixed on me. Stephanie has her own impressive accomplishments, of course, but now, she becomes part of something greater, our family legacy. Michael will guide their household with the financial wisdom he has inherited from his father and me, and together they will build upon what we have established. Michael beamed at his mother's words, seemingly oblivious to their presumptuous nature. William, however, exchanged a knowing glance with Audrey, who subtly rolled her eyes. The evening continued with dancing and celebration, and for brief moments, I lost myself in the happiness of being Michael's wife. Yet throughout the night I noticed him constantly checking his phone, stepping away for brief conversations, and exchanging meaningful looks with Eleanor. In our honeymoon suite that night, Michael was attentive and loving everything a new husband should be. But twice during the night I woke to find him texting someone, the blue light of his phone illuminating his concentrated expression. When I drowsily asked who he was messaging so late, he claimed it was William confirming their golf game next week. I drifted back to sleep, with the uneasy feeling that my new marriage was already built on secrets. I had no idea how quickly that suspicion would be confirmed. The next morning I woke to sunshine streaming through the suite windows, and the realization that I was now Stephanie Wilson, a married woman. Michael's side of the bed was empty, but a handwritten note on his pillow explained he had gone to pick up breakfast from my favorite bakery across town. "Be back in 30 minutes," he had written. "Love you, Mrs. Wilson." The note made me smile, despite my lingering concerns from the night before. Perhaps I was overthinking things. Maybe Eleanor's controlling behavior would diminish now that the wedding was over. I had just finished showering when a firm knock sounded at the suite door. Assuming it was hotel staff with morning coffee, I secured my robe and opened the door without checking the peephole, a mistake I would never make again. Eleanor stood in the hallway, immaculately dressed in a navy blue skirt suit at 8 in the morning. Beside her stood a balding man in his 60s, carrying a leather portfolio. "Good morning, Stephanie dear," Eleanor said, pushing past me into the suite before I could object. "I hope you slept well. This is Richard Bennett, our family notary and legal advisor." "Eleanor." I clutched my robe tighter. "What are you doing here, Michael?" "Just went to get breakfast." "I know exactly where my son is," she replied smoothly. "We arranged it. He will be gone long enough for us to handle some important business." Richard nodded politely, but remained silent as he placed his portfolio on the suite dining table and began removing documents. "What business?" I asked, alarm bells ringing loudly in my mind. "I am not discussing anything without Michael here." Eleanor's smile turned cold. "This concerns your company, Stephanie. Williams Tech Solutions, currently valued at approximately $25.6 million, which you inherited from your grandfather Harold." My blood ran cold. I had never told Michael the exact value of my company. I had mentioned inheriting it certainly, but had been deliberately vague about financial details. "How do you know that?" I demanded. Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. "Information is easy to acquire when you know the right people. I had you thoroughly investigated before allowing Michael to propose. Did you really think I would let my son marry someone without understanding exactly what she brings to the family?" The casual cruelty of her words left me momentarily speechless. Richard, seemingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, cleared his throat and pointed to the chair. "Perhaps Miss Wilson would like to sit down while we review the documents." "That is Mrs. Wilson now," Eleanor corrected sharply. "And yes, Stephanie, you should sit. These documents transfer controlling interest in your company to Michael as your husband. It is a standard protection for both of you, ensuring that your assets are properly managed within the marriage." I remained standing, my shock turning rapidly to anger. "You investigated me, without my knowledge or consent." "Of course I did. The Campbell family might be impressed by your little software company, but the Wilsons have been in finance for generations. We do not take risks with family assets." "My company is not a family asset," I said firmly. "It is my inheritance from my grandfather, established long before I met Michael." Eleanor's expression hardened. "Everything becomes shared in a marriage. Michael's financial expertise will be invaluable to your company growth. These papers simply formalize that arrangement." I stepped closer to the table and quickly scanned the top document. It was indeed a transfer of ownership, giving Michael 70% of my shares and naming him CEO effective immediately. The audacity was breathtaking. "I will not sign these," I stated flatly. "Not now. Not ever. You had no right to prepare these documents without discussing them with me first. Eleanor moved closer, her perfume overwhelming in the confined space. Be reasonable, Stephanie. Michael told me you were keeping secrets about your company value. That is hardly the foundation for a trusting marriage. I was waiting for the right time. I defended, though I knew I owed her no explanation. This is between Michael and me, not you. Everything that affects my son concerns me, she replied. Sign the papers, Stephanie. If you truly love Michael, you will not keep your assets separate from him. This has nothing to do with love, I countered. This is about control. Your control. Eleanor's face flushed with anger. I have built this family reputation and security over decades. I will not have some tech girl with a lucky inheritance threaten that stability. Sign the papers, or I promise you will regret your obstinance. Are you threatening me? On the day after my wedding. I am offering you a choice, Eleanor said, her voice dangerously quiet. Sign willingly and become a true part of this family, or refuse and force me to show Michael what a mistake he has made. Before I could respond, the suite door opened and Michael entered carrying a pink bakery box. His expression shifted from surprise to something more complex when he saw his mother and Richard. Mom, I thought we agreed you would wait until I returned. His tone carried more annoyance than shock, confirming my suspicion that he had known about this ambush. Your wife was being difficult, Eleanor explained as if I were a misbehaving child. Perhaps you can help her understand the importance of these arrangements. Michael set down the bakery box and approached me, taking my hands in his. Stephanie, I know this seems sudden, but it is really just a formality. Mom thinks it would be best if we consolidated our assets early in our marriage. It makes things simpler. I pulled my hands away, staring at this stranger who had been my husband for less than 24 hours. You knew about this. You planned to trick me into signing away my company the day after our wedding. Not trick, he protested weakly. I just thought, after we were married, you would be more open to sharing everything. Sharing is not the same as giving away control, I said, my voice shaking with anger and betrayal. My grandfather built that company from nothing. He trusted me to lead it, not hand it over to someone who hid his intentions until he thought I was legally trapped. Eleanor stepped between us. This emotional display is unnecessary. The papers are standard practice for protecting family interests. Your reluctance only proves you never intended to fully commit to this marriage. This is not about commitment, I exploded. This is about you orchestrating an elaborate con to get control of my company. You investigated me, pushed for this wedding, and now you show up with papers demanding I sign over my inheritance. What kind of family did I just marry into? Michael's face hardened, his charm evaporating as he glanced at his mother. We need to protect our family interests, Stephanie. Mom is right about that. This is a test of your loyalty to us. A test, I repeated incredulously. Marriage is not supposed to come with loyalty tests administered by your mother. You do not understand our family, Michael said defensively. We take care of each other. We protect our collective interests. At whose expense, I demanded. Because right now it looks like your family unity comes at the cost of anyone who marries into it. Eleanor straightened her jacket, her expression icy. I see we will not accomplish anything productive this morning. Richard, pack up the documents. Michael, we should go. Your wife clearly needs time to reconsider her position. I am not leaving, Michael protested. We need to resolve this. Now Eleanor's command was unmistakable, and to my continued shock, he obeyed instantly like a trained dog responding to his master voice. We will talk later, he told me awkwardly, when you have calmed down. I found my voice as they reached the door. All of you get out. I need time alone to think about what just happened. And Michael, do not come back until you decide whether you are my husband or your mother's son, because right now, you cannot be both. The door closed behind them, and I collapsed onto the sofa, my world crumbling around me. The beautiful wedding, the romantic promises, the future I had imagined, all destroyed in a 20-minute conversation that revealed the true nature of the family I had just joined. The moment they left, I locked the door and slid the security chain into place, then sank to the floor, my back against the door, as uncontrollable sobs racked my body. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that it left me gasping for breath. My hands shook as I reached for my phone and called the two people I trusted most. Heather answered immediately, still at the hotel for the post-wedding brunch scheduled for later that day. "Steph, what is wrong? You sound terrible." "I need you," I managed through tears. "Suite 1214, now, and bring Natalie if she is still here." On my way, she promised without questions. While waiting, I called Natalie directly. As my attorney friend and one of my bridesmaids, she had stayed overnight at the riverside as well. "Eleanor and Michael just tried to force me to sign over my company," I explained once she answered. "They brought a notary to our honeymoon suite." "Do not sign anything," she instructed firmly. "I will be there in 5 minutes." When both women arrived, I recounted the morning confrontation in detail, still wearing my bathrobe, my hair dripping wet from the shower that seemed to have occurred in another lifetime. "The trust," I said, suddenly looking at Natalie. "Please tell me the trust protected the company." She nodded, her expression grim but confident. 75% of your shares are safely in the irrevocable trust we established, even as your husband Michael cannot touch those assets. They are completely separate from marital property." The relief was immediate but short-lived. They had my company valuation down to the decimal point, I told them. Eleanor said she had me investigated before the engagement. "That is disturbing, but not technically illegal," Natalie explained, "though it certainly speaks to their intentions from the beginning." Heather paced the sweet fury evident in every step. This was a scam from day one. The whole relationship was a setup. "We do not know that for certain," Natalie cautioned. "Michael may have genuine feelings complicated by his unhealthy relationship with his mother." "Does it matter?" I asked, the pain in my chest almost unbearable. "Whether he loves me or not, he was willing to deceive me to plan this ambush with his mother." While Natalie made calls to ensure additional legal protections for my assets, I began thinking more clearly about the signs I had missed or ignored. I opened my laptop and checked my email archives, finding multiple instances where Michael had asked casual questions about my company's structure, investor relationships, and growth plans. He was gathering intelligence all along, I realized aloud, scrolling through months of correspondence with new awareness. When I checked my recently accessed files, another horrible realization dawned. Documents I had not opened in months showed recent access timestamps, passwords Michael could have easily observed while I worked at home. "He has been in my computer," I said, showing Heather the file history. "Financial reports, shareholder agreements, everything." We spent the next hour reconstructing a timeline of information Michael had likely gathered. The picture that emerged was methodical and calculating. He had been collecting data on Williams Tech Solutions from nearly the beginning of our relationship. Around noon, my phone began ringing constantly. Michael called 7 times in succession, then began texting. "Where are you? Mom says you have had enough time to think." Then, "You are being unreasonable. This is standard financial planning for wealthy families." And finally, "If you refuse to discuss this like an adult, I will have to reconsider our marriage." Eleanor messages were more direct. "Your behavior is damaging Michael's standing in the family. We will pursue legal action if necessary to protect our interests." I blocked both their numbers, unable to stomach more manipulation. Heather ordered room service while Natalie arranged for additional legal counsel, specialized in emergency marital asset protection. "I think we need to consider annulment," Natalie advised. "Given the circumstances, we have grounds for fraud." An annulment after 1 day, I whispered, the reality of my situation hitting me anew. "What will everyone think?" "Who cares?" Heather replied fiercely. "Your grandfather built that company. He trusted you to protect it. Would he want you to stay in a marriage based on deception just to avoid embarrassment?" She was right, of course. Harold had faced countless business challenges with integrity and courage. He would be devastated to see his legacy used as bait in a predatory marriage. That night I barely slept, tormented by nightmares, in which I signed papers that dissolved not just my company, but my very identity. I woke repeatedly, each time remembering with fresh pain that my marriage had been a calculated fraud. By morning I had reached clarity. With Natalie guidance, I began the process for an emergency annulment based on fraud and misrepresentation. She filed the initial paperwork electronically while I packed my belongings, preparing to check out of the honeymoon suite that had become the scene of my greatest humiliation. "You need to face them," Natalie advised, as we finalized our strategy. "On your terms, in a public place with witnesses. Otherwise, they will control the narrative." "I agree," Heather said. "Eleanor is already texting mutual friends claiming you had a nervous breakdown." The thought of confronting Michael and Eleanor made me physically ill, but I knew they were right. This was a battle for more than my company. It was a fight for my dignity and the truth. I arranged to meet Michael in the hotel lobby at noon, a public space where Eleanor's influence would be tempered by the presence of other guests. Natalie and Heather positioned themselves nearby at the lobby bar within sight, but giving us apparent privacy. To my surprise, but not Natalie, Michael arrived with Eleanor in tow. They approached my table with the confident stride of people accustomed to getting their way. Eleanor wore another impeccable suit, while Michael looked haggard, his eyes bloodshot, as if he had slept poorly. "Stephanie." He began, taking the seat across from me, without waiting for an invitation. "This has gotten out of hand. We need to talk rationally." "Yes, we do," I agreed, my voice steadier than I expected. "I would like to understand exactly what happened yesterday." Eleanor interjected immediately. "What happened is that you overreacted to standard financial planning. Many new brides find the practical aspects of marriage overwhelming." "Please do not speak for Michael," I said firmly, looking directly at my husband of 48 hours. "I want to hear from him why he thought it was appropriate to ambush me with documents transferring my company to his control." Michael shifted uncomfortably. "It was not an ambush. Mom thought it would be easier to handle the paperwork right away before we got caught up in honeymoon excitement." "And you agreed with this plan?" I pressed. He glanced at Eleanor, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "I thought it made financial sense to consolidate our assets. My background in finance makes me more qualified to manage large investments." "More qualified than me?" "The woman who has successfully run the company for 3 years. The granddaughter Harold, specifically trained to take over." "Women often have a more emotional approach to business," Eleanor stated, as if reciting an established fact. "Michael has an MBA from Wharton. Your decisions would naturally benefit from his guidance." I turned to Eleanor, abandoning all pretense of excluding her from the conversation. "Let me be clear. I know exactly what happened. You investigated me before Michael proposed. You discovered my company value and saw an opportunity. You pushed for a rapid engagement, controlled the wedding planning, and prepared documents to seize control of my assets immediately after I was legally bound to your son." I removed my phone from my purse and placed it on the table. "I recorded our conversation yesterday. Every word, including your admission about the investigation and your threat if I did not comply." Eleanor's face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Recording without consent is illegal in this state." "Actually," I replied calmly, "this is a one-party consent state. And regardless of admissibility in court, the recording exists and could certainly affect public opinion of the Wilson family financial practices." Michael looked genuinely panicked now. "Stephanie, please. We can work this out privately." "There is nothing to work out," I stated flatly. "Our marriage was based on fraud from the beginning. You pursued me for my company, not for love." "That is not true," he protested, though his eyes flickered to his mother rather than meeting mine. "I do love you. The company was just a bonus." The casual cruelty of his words struck me like a physical blow. A bonus. My grandfather's legacy was a bonus prize for marrying me. Eleanor leaned forward, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Be practical, Stephanie. Divorces are messy, expensive, and damage everyone's reputation. As Michael's wife, you are entitled to certain social and financial benefits. The Wilson name carries weight in this city. I am not interested in your family name or connections, I replied, and we will not be getting divorced. Michael's expression brightened momentarily until I continued. We will be getting an annulment, I clarified, placing a folder on the table. My attorney has already filed the paperwork citing fraud as grounds. Given the evidence we have, including the recording witnesses to your mother's admission about the investigation and the suspicious timing of the documents you presented, I believe the court will find in my favor. I slid the folder toward Michael. These are the annulment papers. You can sign them now, or we can proceed to a hearing where I will present all available evidence of your intentions. Eleanor's hand shot out covering the folder before Michael could touch it. This is absurd. You cannot possibly think a judge would grant an annulment after a legal wedding. A judge might be very interested in a case where a family conspired to gain control of a multi-million-dollar company through marriage, I countered, especially with recorded evidence. I turned my attention fully to Michael, ignoring Eleanor completely. This is your chance to make one decision for yourself, Michael. You can sign these papers, and we can both move forward, or you can remain under your mother's control and face the consequences of what you have done in court. Your choice. Eleanor began to speak, but Michael raised his hand in a gesture that shocked us both. Stop, Mom. Just stop. He looked at me, real emotion, finally showing in his face. I did love you, Stephanie. That part was real. But yes, when Mom discovered your company value, things changed. She convinced me we needed to secure your assets for the family. For her control, you mean? I corrected gently. He nodded slowly. I knew it was wrong. The night before the wedding, I almost told you everything. But you did not. No, he admitted, shame evident in his slumped shoulders. I was not strong enough to stand up to her. I never have been. Eleanor stood abruptly. I will not listen to this betrayal. Michael, we are leaving. Our attorneys will contact Miss Campbell representatives. My name is still legally Wilson, I reminded her. For the moment. For the first time in our interaction, Michael did not immediately follow his mother's command. Instead, he reached for the folder, opened it, and stared at the signature line. If I sign this, he asked quietly, what happens to the recording? It stays private provided the annulment proceeds without contest, I answered truthfully. He nodded, took the pen I offered, and signed his name. Eleanor gasped as if he had physically struck her. What have you done? She hissed. You have no authority to sign legal documents without our attorney's review. I am 34 years old, Mom, Michael replied, his voice tired but resolute. I think it is time I made at least one decision without your approval. He stood looking down at me with genuine regret. I am sorry, Stephanie. You deserved better than what we did to you. With that, he walked away, leaving Eleanor standing alone at the table, her perfect composure finally cracking as she realized her plan had collapsed. This is not over, she warned, gathering her purse with trembling hands. The Wilsons do not accept defeat easily. Neither do the Campbells, I replied, picking up the signed annulment papers. And unlike you, I am not trying to take something that does not belong to me. I am simply protecting what is mine. As Eleanor stalked away, Heather and Natalie joined me at the table. Heather squeezed my shoulder in silent support, while Natalie examined the signature. It is done, she confirmed. I will file these immediately. The judge I spoke with this morning was sympathetic to the circumstances. We should have this resolved quickly. I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness mixed with relief. The future I had imagined was gone, but my grandfather's legacy remained protected. In that moment, it was enough. 6 months after my one-day marriage, the annulment was finalized with surprising speed and minimal drama. The judge reviewed the evidence Natalie presented and agreed that fraud had occurred. Michael did not contest the filing, and Eleanor's threats of counteraction never materialized into actual legal challenges. With the personal crisis behind me, I threw myself into Williams Tech Solutions with renewed focus and determination. We launched a new healthcare data security platform that had been in development for years and within months, secured contracts with 3 major hospital systems. The company valuation grew to $30 million, validating my leadership in ways that felt deeply satisfying. During this period of professional success, I unexpectedly reconnected with Audrey, who had divorced William shortly after my annulment was filed. She reached out via email, asking if we could meet for coffee. "I heard what happened," she said, "when we met at a quiet cafe downtown. William and I were already having problems, but seeing Eleanor orchestrate that scheme against you was my final breaking point." "How did William react to the annulment?" I asked, curious about the family dynamic I had narrowly escaped. Audrey smiled grimly. "He was shocked that Michael actually stood up to Eleanor, even in that small way. It created quite the family crisis. William and I had been in counseling, but when I suggested he might also need to establish boundaries with his mother, he chose her as he always has." Over the following months, Audrey and I developed a genuine friendship built on our shared experience with the Wilson family dynamics. She had spent 7 years married to William, gradually losing pieces of herself to Eleanor, controlling influence. "The saddest part," she confided during one of our regular dinner meetings, "is that both Michael and William are talented, intelligent men who could have had wonderful lives if they had been allowed to develop independently. Eleanor love is real, but it is so possessive that it has crippled them." Inspired by our conversations, I began volunteering with a support group for people recovering from controlling relationships. Sharing my experience, albeit with names and specific details changed, helped others recognize warning signs I had missed. The healing that came from turning my painful experience into something beneficial for others was profound. In a surprising development, I received an email from Richard the Notary, who had been present during the confrontation in my honeymoon suite. He apologized for his role and revealed that Eleanor had pressured him to prepare the documents without fully explaining the circumstances. "I have known the Wilson family for decades," he wrote, "but what happened that day crossed ethical lines I should never have approached. I wanted you to know, I have terminated my professional relationship with them." 2 years after the annulment, Williams Tech Solutions had grown to a $40 million company with offices in 5 cities. In honor of my grandfather's vision, I established the Harold Campbell Scholarship for Women in Technology, supporting young women pursuing degrees in computer science and business technology. I occasionally heard news about Michael and Eleanor through mutual acquaintances. They had apparently attempted a similar scheme with a wealthy widow who owned a successful chain of boutique hotels. This time, however, their target had been more suspicious from the beginning, and the relationship ended before an engagement could be announced. The most valuable lesson from my experience was learning to trust my instincts. Every warning sign had been visible early in my relationship with Michael: his deference to his mother Eleanor, obsession with financial details, the subtle isolation from my friends and advisors. I had seen these red flags, but rationalized them away, wanting to believe in the relationship I thought we were building. Your gut knows the truth before your heart is ready to accept. It became my mantra, both in personal relationships and business decisions. Strangely, my experience did not close my heart to the possibility of love. If anything, it clarified what genuine partnership should feel like. I began dating again, about a year after the annulment, approaching relationships with wiser eyes, but still an open heart. I was more cautious, certainly, but refused to let Eleanor and Michael deception make me bitter or mistrustful of everyone. My grandfather had built his company on the principle that technology should connect people and improve lives, not isolate or control them. In the aftermath of my almost marriage, I came to understand that relationships should follow the same principle: honest connection that enhances both lives, rather than one person controlling the other. The most valuable assets in life cannot be acquired through deception. I often told the support group members, True success in business and in love comes from building something real, together with integrity, at its foundation. I still wear my grandfather watch, the one he left me along with the company. Its inscription reads, "Time reveals truth. Trust it." Those words have become my guide, reminding me that rushing into decisions often leads to regret, while patience reveals what needs to be seen. My grandfather once told me that the most precious asset is not money or property, but the ability to believe in your own worth and the courage to protect it. Now I finally understand the profound meaning behind those words. Have you ever ignored warning signs in a relationship because you wanted to believe in someone? Let me know in the comments below. If this story helped you recognize red flags in your own life, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that trusting their instincts could save them from heartache. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth is never negotiable.